Ma'am, we need to verify your citizenship status right now.
Excuse me? I'm a veteran. I fought for this country.
Look, anyone can buy a camo hat. Show me the papers.
I don't have to show you a damn thing.
That's obstruction. Hands behind your back. Let's go.
Hands on me, you'll regret it.
This is a story about the cost of presumption and the precise weight of a badge when it is used as a weapon rather than a shield. It is about a woman who had already signed her name on the line to defend the Constitution, only to find herself attacked by the very agents sworn to uphold it. When the systems designed to protect the border turn inward against citizens based on nothing more than a visual bias, the only defense left is the rigid, unyielding truth of the record. This is how Destiny Baker fought back. The heat coming off the tarmac at Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport was enough to distort the air shimmering in waves above the concrete of the Terminal 4 curbside. It was a Tuesday morning, just past the heavy rush of the early bank of flights, but the noise was still a constant grinding roar, the hiss of air brakes from the shuttle buses, the slamming of trunks, the whistle of traffic control officers directing the flow of SUVs and taxis. Destiny Baker stood near the sign for American Airlines departures, her posture practically vibrating with the disciplined stillness she had cultivated over 8 years in the United States Army. Destiny was not a woman who moved without purpose. At 34, she carried herself with a quiet, efficient economy of motion. Her luggage, a hard-shell matte black suitcase, and a matching carry-on was stacked neatly beside her right leg. She wasn't checking her phone nervously. She wasn't looking around confused. She was simply waiting for her ride, checking her watch, a sturdy tactical Garmin that she had worn since her second deployment, and breathing in the dry desert air. For Destiny, the airport was usually a place of transition, a neutral ground between missions. But today, it was supposed to be the start of a vacation, a rare exhale after 3 years of working civilian logistics contracts for the Department of Defense. She had grown up in a chaotic household, moving between foster placements in Chicago before finding the military. The service had been her escape, her sanctuary. It gave her order. It gave her a code. It taught her that if you followed the regulations, if you kept your uniform pressed and your paperwork in order, you were safe. That belief was the foundation of her life. She kept her documents, passport, veteran, ERD driver's license, in a specific leather organizer in her front bag, always accessible, always valid. She believed in the system because the system had saved her. She didn't see Henry Delaney approach until he was already inside her personal space. Henry Delaney was a man who wore his authority like a suit of armor that had grown too tight. With 20 years in federal service bouncing between agencies before landing a role in a specialized interdiction task force, Delaney moved with the heavy-footed confidence of a man who stopped asking questions a decade ago. He was wearing a tactical vest over a polo shirt with federal insignias, his sunglasses perched on top of a shaved head that was beginning to burn in the sun. He wasn't looking at Destiny's luggage. He wasn't looking at her ticket. He was looking at her. "Ma'am," Delaney said. It wasn't a greeting. It was a command to freeze. Destiny turned her movement smooth. She saw the badge, the vest, the hand resting near the belt line. Her internal threat assessment honed in logistics convoys flagged amber. But this was home. This was Phoenix. "Yes, officer, can I help you? I need to see your identification and your boarding pass," Delaney stated. He didn't offer a reason. He didn't introduce himself. He simply held out a hand palm up, expecting compliance. Destiny nodded. She knew the drill. Security checks were part of the world she lived in. "Of course. 1 second." She reached into her bag, her movements deliberate so as not to startle him. She pulled out her leather organizer. She extracted her Arizona driver's license, which had the veteran designation clearly printed in the corner, and her digital boarding pass on her phone. She handed the license to him. "I'm flying to..." Delaney didn't look at the license. He held it for a fraction of a second before looking back at her face. "I need proof of citizenship/residency, passport or green card." Destiny paused. The request was irregular for a domestic flight curb check, especially after handing over a valid real ID. The noise of the airport seemed to drop away, slightly replaced by a high-pitched ringing in her ears. "Officer, that is a real ID, compliant driver's license. I'm a U.S. citizen. I'm flying to Philadelphia. Domestic." "I didn't ask where you're flying," Delaney said, his voice dropping an octave, aiming for intimidation. "We're conducting an interdiction operation. You fit the profile of an individual traveling with fraudulent documents. I need to see a passport or naturalization papers. Now." There it was. The profile. Destiny looked around. There were dozens of people on the curb. A white family with 3 screaming children was unloading a mountain of bags 10 feet away. A businessman in a suit was yelling into a headset. No one else was being stopped. I don't have naturalization papers, Destiny said, keeping her voice level, though her heart rate was climbing. I was born in Chicago. I'm a veteran of the United States Army. That license in your hand verifies my service and my citizenship. Delaney scoffed a short, sharp sound of dismissal. He looked at the license, then flipped it over, then looked back at her. These can be bought at any flea market south of the border if you know who to ask. You're agitated. Why are you agitated if you're a citizen? I'm not agitated, Destiny said, her hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of restraint. I'm confused. I've identified myself. Am I free to leave, or are you detaining me? Delaney stepped closer. The physical intimidation was palpable. I'm detaining you for investigation of immigration violations. Turn around and place your hands on the vehicle. For what? Destiny stepped back, her boot hitting her suitcase. I just showed you government-issued ID. I have a military ID in my wallet if you want to see that. I said turn around, Delaney snapped. He didn't wait for compliance. He reached out and grabbed Destiny's left wrist. The contact was the spark. Destiny didn't fight, but she didn't go limp. She went rigid, her training kicking in to maintain her center of gravity. Do not touch me. I am complying with verbal commands, but you are hurting my shoulder. Stop resisting, Delaney shouted the magic words that authorized escalation. He spun her around, slamming her chest against the hot metal of a parked rental car. The sound of the impact was dull and heavy. This was the moment the airport stopped being a transit hub and became an arena. People froze. The family with the children stopped unloading. The businessman lowered his phone. The sheer visual dissonance of the scene, a well-dressed black woman being manhandled by a federal agent while her luggage stood neatly in rows, broke the trance of the travelers. Hey, a voice called out. It was a man in a flannel shirt standing by the sliding doors. She showed you her ID, we saw it. Delaney ignored the crowd. He was wrestling Destiny's arms behind her back. You're under arrest for assaulting a federal officer and failure to provide documentation. I didn't assault anyone. Destiny gasped, her face pressed against the hot car hood. Check my pocket. My military ID is in the organizer. Just look at it. I'm not playing games with your fake papers, Delaney grunted, cinching the handcuffs too tight. The metal bit into the soft tissue of Destiny's wrists. It was here that the system began to fracture, not because of what Destiny did, but because of what the bystanders did. It started with one phone, then 3, then 10. The travelers didn't run away. They formed a loose semicircle, a human witness circle, keeping a distance of 20 feet but refusing to leave. They held their phones high, the camera lenses like unblinking eyes. Ensure a one-visual/audio record. A young woman in a college hoodie held her phone steady, the screen displaying the recording time of 9:42 a.m., capturing the clear image of Destiny's military ID lying on the ground where it had fallen, the holographic crest catching the sun while Delaney kicked it under the car with his boot. Pick that up, the woman in the hoodie yelled. You kicked her ID, it's right there. Delaney looked up, his face flushed red. He realized perhaps for the first time that the audience wasn't on his side. Back up. This is a federal operation, back up, or you'll all be detained for interference. But they didn't back up. They stopped moving forward, but they didn't retreat. Inside the terminal, the friction was happening at a different level. A TSA supervisor, Maria Gonzalez, had come out through the automatic doors at the commotion. She saw Delaney, whom she knew by reputation as a cowboy, an agent who generated complaints but always had his numbers to hide behind. She saw Destiny handcuffed and bent over a car. Maria keyed her radio. Dispatch, we have an agency situation at curb 4. Agent Delaney has a passenger in cuffs. It looks bad. Copy, supervisor, the voice crackled back. Does he need assistance? No, Maria said, her voice tight. The passenger needs assistance. Get PD down here, now. Maria walked toward the scene. She wanted to intervene, but the jurisdictional lines at an airport are like invisible electric fences. She couldn't physically pull a federal agent off a suspect. She caught Delaney's eye. Henry, what do you have? Maria asked, keeping her voice professional but loud enough for the cameras. Non-compliant female. Delaney spat, yanking Destiny up by the handcuffs. Destiny cried out in pain, a sharp, involuntary sound. Refused to show citizenship. Resisted detention. Suspected fraudulent documents. I showed him my license. Destiny yelled, her voice cracking with humiliation and rage. I'm a veteran. My name is Destiny Baker. Check the system. She's a citizen, Henry. Maria said, looking at the luggage, the demeanor. Let's take this inside to the office. De-escalate. I'm taking her to the station, Delaney said. She's going into the system. You take her to the station and you're going to have a riot on this curb, Maria said, gesturing to the crowd. Look at them. The crowd was growing louder. Let her go. She's a vet. You didn't even read her ID. Delaney hesitated. The walls of the arena were closing in. He shoved Destiny towards the sliding doors. Move. They marched her through the terminal. It was a walk of shame that Destiny would later describe in court as the longest mile of her life. People stared. Whispers followed her. What did she do? Is she a terrorist? The humiliation burned hotter than the Arizona sun. She kept her head up, tears streaming silently down her face, focusing on the tactical breathing she had learned in basic training. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. They reached the holding room, a sterile, windowless box in the bowels of the airport. Delaney shoved her into a metal chair. He didn't uncuff her. He sat across from her, pulling out a form. A name? Destiny Baker. Country of origin? United States of America. Delaney slammed his hand on the table. Don't lie to me. If you cooperate, maybe I can talk to the prosecutor. Where were you born? Who gave you the fake ID? I want a lawyer, Destiny said. I am invoking my right to counsel. I will not answer any more questions until I have a JAG officer or a civilian attorney present. You don't have rights here until I know who you are, Delaney said, leaning in. And right now, you're nobody. But Destiny wasn't nobody. While she was sitting in that room, the machinery of her life, the backstory she had built, was turning. Her phone, which had been confiscated, but not turned off, was buzzing in the evidence bag. Her ride, a fellow vet named Marcus, had seen the commotion from the cell phone lot. He hadn't just waited. He had called the number Destiny had given him for emergencies, a contact she made during her contracting work. Anshore D1, legal/institutional communication. The heavy steel door of the interrogation room opened, and a Phoenix police sergeant stepped in, holding a cell phone on speaker mode, from which the distinct, sharp voice of an assistant U.S. attorney was saying, Agent Delaney, this is AUSA Miller. I have verified Ms. Baker's identity through DOD records, and I am advising you to cease this interrogation immediately. Delaney froze. He looked at the phone, then at the sergeant, then at Destiny. She's verified, Delaney stammered. She has a top-secret clearance. Henry, the sergeant, said, his voice flat, devoid of sympathy. She has higher clearance than you do. You arrested a federal contractor with valid credentials because you didn't like the look of her. The silence in the room was absolute. Destiny looked at Delaney. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She watched the color drain from his face as the realization hit him. He hadn't just made a mistake. He had ended his career. Uncuff her, the AUSA's voice commanded from the speaker. Now! Delaney's hands shook as he reached for the key. The metal clicked. Destiny rubbed her wrists, the skin broken and bleeding. She stood up. She didn't ask for an apology. She knew it wouldn't be sincere. I want my property, she said, and I want the names of everyone in this room. The aftermath was not a swift victory lap. It was a slow grinding war of attrition. The criminal charges against Destiny, assisting and resisting, were dropped within hours, but the trauma didn't vanish. She lost her contract because she couldn't travel pending the internal investigation. She suffered from nightmares, waking up in a sweat, feeling the heat of the car hood against her face. She couldn't walk into an airport without a panic attack. But she didn't let it go. She sued. The civil trial, held 2 years later in a federal courtroom in Phoenix, was the final payoff path, PP6. The courtroom was packed. The jury was diverse: a teacher, a mechanic, a nurse, a retired engineer. They watched the video from the bystander anchor A1. They saw Destiny standing politely. They saw Delaney escalate without cause. They saw him kick the military ID under the car. Then came the testimony. Delaney took the stand. He tried to rely on instinct and training. He talked about anomalies and behavioral detection. Destiny's lawyer, a sharp, relentless civil rights attorney, cross-examined him. Agent Delaney, the lawyer, asked, projecting the image of Destiny's driver's license on the screen. You stated in your report that the ID looked fraudulent. Can you point to a single feature on this image which was recovered from the scene that indicates fraud? Delaney squinted. He shifted in his chair. It was the demeanor, the total picture. So the ID was fine, the lawyer said. The passport you refused to look at was fine. The military service was real. The only thing that was fraudulent in your mind was the idea that a woman looking like Ms. Baker could be who she said she was. Is that correct? I was doing my job, Delaney muttered. No, the lawyer said, turning to the jury. You were doing your bias. The verdict, when it came, was a thunderclap. The jury didn't just find for Destiny. They sent a message. They awarded $200,000 in compensatory damages for the physical injury and emotional distress. But then came the punitive damages, the money designed to punish the institution and the agent. $8 million. When the foreperson read the number, a gasp went through the room. Destiny sat still, her hands clasped on the table. She didn't cheer. She closed her eyes and let out a breath she felt like she had been holding for 2 years. The institutional backbone, which had been slow to form, finally solidified in the wake of the verdict. The agency didn't appeal. The headlines were too damaging. Final institutional actions. The termination. Henry Delaney's employment was terminated for cause 3 weeks after the verdict, stripping him of his pension eligibility related to the final years of his service. The protocol shift. The Department of Homeland Security issued a new directive explicitly banning the refusal to inspect offered documentation during domestic stops, requiring agents to run the name through the database before initiating physical restraint. The reinstatement Destiny received a formal letter from the Department of Defense reinstating her clearance status and offering her priority placement on logistics contracts, acknowledging that her arrest was without merit. Destiny stood on the courthouse steps. The cameras were there again, but this time she controlled the narrative. She held up her military ID, the same one that had been kicked under the car. "They tried to tell me I didn't belong," Destiny said to the reporters, her voice steady. "They tried to take my name, but I know who I am, and now they know too. The Constitution isn't just paper, it's what happens when we refuse to let them tear it up." She walked down the steps not as a victim, but as a woman who had forced the system to look her in the eye. This story highlights a terrifying reality. Legitimate documentation is only as powerful as the person willing to read it. When authority figures replace protocol with profiling, the protection of the border becomes a violation of the citizen. Destiny's victory wasn't just about the money. It was about forcing the government to acknowledge that bias is not a valid law enforcement tool. Practical takeaways. First, if you are stopped by law enforcement or federal agents, clearly and audibly state that you are complying with commands, as this creates a verbal record for witnesses. Next, if you have valid identification, present it and verbally describe what you are handing over, such as saying, "I am handing you my real ID compliant license." Third, if an agent refuses to look at your documents, do not physically resist. Instead, immediately invoke your right to counsel and ask for a supervisor. Fourth, for bystanders. Remember that recording from a safe distance is a legal right in public spaces and can be the deciding factor in preserving the truth. Finally, never assume that following the rules protects you from bias, but know that maintaining your composure gives you the strongest possible ground for the legal battle that follows. Some elements are selectively fictionalized for education.